the Colosseum still stands, a giant among ruins. Its walls are weathered, its arches broken, but it holds the memory of a time when Rome ruled the known world. How did a small city by the Tiber River rise to such greatness? How did it grow from a cluster of mud huts into an empire that stretched across continents? And how did it all come crashing down? In this story, we'll follow Rome's incredible journey. From its beginnings as a city-state to its golden age as a superpower, and finally, its collapse into chaos. We'll uncover how its culture, politics, and innovations left a mark so deep that we still feel it today, whether it's in the languages we speak, the buildings we live in, or the laws we follow. Rome wasn't just a place. It was an idea, a force, and a vision that changed the course of history forever. So, how did it happen? Let's start where every great story begins, with a legend. According to Roman mythology, the city's founders were twins, Romulus and Remus, born to a mortal princess and the god Mars, the god of war. But their beginnings were anything but royal. Abandoned as infants, they were left to die by the Tiber River. That should have been the end of the story, but fate had other plans. A she-wolf, drawn by their cries, took the twins in, nursing them as her own. It's said they grew up wild but strong, eventually becoming leaders of a band of outcasts. When they came of age, they decided to build a city where they had been rescued. But even legends aren't without conflict. The brothers argued over the city's location, and their fight turned deadly. Romulus killed Remus, and in 753 BCE, Rome, named after Romulus, was born. Of course, the truth is more complicated. Rome didn't appear overnight. The land around the Tiber had long been home to settlements. Among the most influential were the Etruscans, a sophisticated civilization known for their engineering and culture. They brought new ideas to the early Romans. Arched bridges, urban planning, and even the gladiatorial games had their roots in Etruscan traditions. These early influences shaped Rome as it began to grow, but the city wasn't just borrowing ideas, it was creating its own identity. Under its early kings, Rome began to take form. These kings weren't just rulers, they were builders. They oversaw the construction of roads, temples, and the first version of what would become the Roman Forum, the heart of Roman life. One king, Tarquinius Priscus, is credited with building Rome's first sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, a marvel of engineering that still exists today. But monarchy came with its problems. The last king, Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, ruled with an iron fist. His arrogance and cruelty angered the people and the Senate, planting the seeds of revolution. And this is where Rome's story shifts dramatically. From kings to republics, from rulers to elected officials, Rome would soon reinvent itself, setting the stage for its rise to power. But what made the people turn against their kings? And how did this small city begin its journey to becoming a global empire? That's where we're headed next. The Roman Republic was born out of rebellion. In 509 BCE, after years of tyranny under King Tarquinius Superbus, the Romans had enough. His cruel reign, marked by arrogance and oppression, pushed the people and the Senate over the edge. The final straw came when his son committed an unspeakable crime against a noblewoman named Lucretia, an act that led to her tragic death and sparked outrage across the city. Her story became a rallying cry for freedom, and the people rose up. Tarquin was overthrown, and Rome declared it would never again be ruled by a king. Instead, the Romans created something revolutionary for their time, a republic. Power would now lie in the hands of the Senate and elected officials, not a single ruler. They established a system of checks and balances, with 2 consuls elected annually to share power. It was an imperfect system, but it was the foundation of what would become one of the most influential governments in history. The idea that leaders should be accountable to the people was radical, and it worked. At least for a while. But Rome wasn't content to just govern itself. It began to expand. Surrounded by rival tribes and territories, Rome had no choice but to defend itself, and often, defense turned into conquest. Through a series of wars with neighbors like the Samnites and the Latin League, Rome began to grow. With each victory, it absorbed more land and people, slowly building an empire even before it knew it was won. And then came one of Rome's greatest challenges, the Punic Wars. These were a series of 3 wars fought against Carthage, a powerful city-state in North Africa. The Second Punic War, in particular, was the stuff of legend. Carthage's brilliant general, Hannibal, led his army, including war elephants, on an extraordinary march across the Alps to attack Rome from the north. His campaign terrified the Romans, but they held their ground. After years of battles, the Roman general Scipio Africanus finally defeated Hannibal at the Battle of Zama, ending Carthage's hopes of victory. The Third Punic War was brutal. By this point, Rome wasn't just interested in defeating Carthage, it wanted to erase it. In 146 BCE, Roman forces destroyed the city completely, burning it to the ground and ensuring it would never rise again. Rome now controlled the Mediterranean, calling it Mare Nostrum, our sea. But success came at a cost. Rome's rapid expansion brought wealth, power, and influence, but it also created deep inequalities and conflicts at home. The gap between the rich and the poor grew wider. Generals gained enormous power, often rivaling the Senate itself. And the Republic, built on the idea of shared power, started to crack under the weight of its own ambition. How could a system that brought so much success also create the seeds of its own destruction? The Roman Republic was a remarkable experiment in governance, but even the greatest systems can falter under pressure. By the 2nd century BCE, cracks had begun to show. Rome's expansion brought wealth to the city, but only to a few. The rich got richer, buying up land and driving small farmers into poverty. Meanwhile, the poor, many of them veterans of Rome's wars, flocked to the city, desperate for work. The Republic, which had been built on the ideal of shared power, now seemed to serve the interests of the elite. This growing inequality led to unrest, and the first signs of revolution came with the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius. These 2 tribunes tried to push reforms to redistribute land and provide grain for the poor. Their ideas were popular with the masses but deeply unpopular with the Senate, which saw them as a threat to its authority. Both brothers were killed in violent clashes, but their deaths only deepened the divide between the classes, setting the stage for more upheaval. Amid this turmoil, a new kind of leader emerged, the strongman general. Men like Gaius Marius, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, and later Pompey gained enormous power by commanding the loyalty of their armies rather than the Republic. Marius, a brilliant military reformer, opened up the army to the poor, giving them a path to wealth and status. But this also made soldiers more loyal to their generals than to Rome itself. Sulla took this dynamic to another level. In 88 BCE, he did the unthinkable. He marched his army on Rome itself, seizing control of the city. He declared himself dictator, purged his enemies, and rewrote the laws to strengthen the Senate's power. While Sulla eventually stepped down, he left a dangerous precedent. Generals with armies loyal to them could dominate Roman politics by force. And then came Julius Caesar. A charismatic and ambitious leader, Caesar rose through the ranks of Roman politics and military campaigns, building a reputation as a brilliant strategist. His conquest of Gaul not only expanded Rome's territory but also made him incredibly popular with the people, and incredibly dangerous to his rivals. In 49 BCE, when the Senate, led by Pompey, ordered Caesar to give up his command, he made a fateful decision. He marched his army across the Rubicon River, a boundary no general was allowed to cross with troops. As Caesar stepped onto Roman soil, he reportedly said, "The die is cast." This act of defiance plunged Rome into civil war. Caesar emerged victorious, defeating Pompey and consolidating power. In 44 BCE, he declared himself dictator for life, a title that alarmed many in the Senate. To them, Caesar's rule looked dangerously like the monarchy they had overthrown centuries earlier. So, on the Ides of March, a group of senators led by Brutus and Cassius assassinated him, stabbing him to death on the Senate floor. Caesar's death was supposed to restore the Republic, but instead, it marked its end. His assassination plunged Rome into another round of civil wars, ultimately leading to the rise of his heir, Octavian, later known as Augustus Caesar. With Augustus, the Roman Republic was gone, replaced by an empire. The death of Julius Caesar wasn't just the fall of a man, it was the fall of an idea. The Republic, once a symbol of shared power and civic duty, had been consumed by ambition, inequality, and violence. But out of its ashes, a new Rome was about to rise, one even more powerful than before. The Roman Republic was gone, but what rose in its place was something extraordinary: the Roman Empire. And it all began with one man, Augustus Caesar. Born as Octavian, the adopted heir of Julius Caesar, Augustus was a master of strategy and diplomacy. After years of bloody civil war, he brought stability to Rome, not through force alone, but by reshaping its very foundations. He called himself the first citizen rather than a king, but make no mistake, he held absolute power. Augustus reformed the government, expanded the military, and secured Rome's borders. He improved infrastructure, built roads, and famously declared, "I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble." Under his rule, Rome entered the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, a golden age that lasted for nearly 2 centuries. The Pax Romana wasn't just about peace, it was about progress. Roman engineers built aqueducts that carried water across vast distances, roads that connected the empire, and monuments that still inspire awe. Laws were codified, creating a legal system that would influence governments for millennia. Culture thrived as poets like Virgil and historians like Livy documented Rome's greatness. But no empire can run on peace alone, and Rome's history is filled with emperors whose reigns shaped its legacy, for better or worse. Take Nero, for instance. Known for his artistic ambitions and extravagant lifestyle, Nero's rule ended in chaos. Some say he played the lyre as Rome burned, though that's likely a myth. What isn't a myth is the instability his reign left behind. Then there were the good emperors, like Trajan, who expanded the empire to its greatest extent, and Hadrian, who fortified its borders with landmarks like Hadrian's Wall in Britain. These leaders understood that Rome's strength wasn't just in conquest but in administration and defense. And finally, there was Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, who ruled with wisdom and restraint. His meditations, written in his private journal, reveal a man deeply concerned with justice and the responsibilities of power. But even Marcus Aurelius couldn't stop the forces that were beginning to chip away at the empire. While Rome seemed invincible on the surface, cracks were forming beneath. The empire's vast size made it difficult to govern, economic pressures began to strain its resources, and internal corruption weakened its institutions. The question was no longer how far Rome could expand, but whether it could hold itself together. The Pax Romana may have been a golden age, but every golden age eventually fades. And as Rome pushed forward, the seeds of its decline were already taking root. The Roman Empire wasn't destroyed in a single day. Its fall was like a crumbling wall, cracks appearing over time until the entire structure finally gave way. By the 3rd century, Rome was already struggling to hold itself together. Economic and social problems were at the heart of its decline. Inflation became rampant as the empire devalued its currency to fund endless wars and luxuries. Over-reliance on slave labor meant the economy stagnated. When conquests slowed, so did the influx of slaves, and the system began to falter. Meanwhile, civic unity, one of Rome's greatest strengths, started to erode. The sense of duty and pride that had built the empire was replaced by corruption and self-interest at every level of government. And then came the external pressures. Barbarian tribes, once kept at bay by Rome's mighty legions, began to push harder against its borders. The Visigoths, driven from their lands by the advancing Huns, sought refuge in Roman territory but were met with hostility and betrayal. In 410 CE, led by Alaric, they sacked Rome itself, a shocking blow to a city that had once seemed untouchable. But the Visigoths weren't the only threat. The Vandals, a fierce tribe from North Africa, attacked Rome again in 455 CE, leaving destruction in their wake. And then there were the Huns, led by the infamous Attila, who swept through Europe like a storm, striking fear into the hearts of even the bravest warriors. Rome's armies, once the envy of the world, were stretched too thin, and their loyalty was often bought rather than earned. By the time we reach 476 CE, the Western Roman Empire was a shadow of its former self. The once mighty city that had ruled the known world was now at the mercy of its enemies. That year, the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by a barbarian leader named Odoacer. It was a quiet end to what had once been the most powerful empire on earth. But was this truly the fall of Rome? While the Western Empire crumbled, the Eastern Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for another 1,000 years, with its capital in Constantinople. And even as Rome itself fell, its ideas, culture, and influence didn't vanish. Roman law, architecture, and even its language lived on, shaping the foundations of Western civilization. Rome's fall wasn't sudden or simple. It was the result of centuries of internal decay and external pressure. A story of ambition, resilience, and ultimately, collapse. But in many ways, Rome never truly died. Its legacy is all around us, from the buildings in our cities to the laws that govern us. The empire may have fallen, but its spirit endures. Even after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the legacy of Rome continued to shape the world in ways its founders could never have imagined. Rome wasn't just a city or an empire, it was an idea, one that left its fingerprints on every corner of Western civilization. Start with law and governance. The Roman legal system, with its emphasis on fairness and equality, became the foundation for legal codes across Europe and beyond. Concepts like innocent until proven guilty and the structure of courts have their roots in Roman law. In Rome's system of governance, the idea of a republic, where power is shared and laws govern the people, still echoes in modern democracies. Then there's language. Latin, the language of Rome, didn't die with the empire. It evolved into the Romance languages, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian, and became the backbone of scientific, legal, and religious terminology. Even today, Latin phrases like et cetera or carpe diem remain part of our everyday language. Roman architecture and engineering are another enduring legacy. The Romans mastered techniques like the arch, the aqueduct, and the use of concrete, building structures that have stood the test of time. The Colosseum, the Pantheon, and the sprawling network of Roman roads aren't just monuments, they're symbols of innovation and ambition. Modern infrastructure owes much to these ancient designs. But perhaps the most profound legacy of Rome was its role in the rise of Christianity. What began as a small, persecuted sect in the 1st century grew into the dominant religion of the empire by the 4th century, thanks to emperors like Constantine, who embraced and legalized it. Constantine's founding of Constantinople as the new capital of the empire turned the city into a center of Christian thought and power. Rome's transformation into a hub of Christianity ensured that the faith would shape the culture, politics, and philosophy of the Western world for centuries to come. And even as the Western Empire crumbled, the Byzantine Empire carried the torch of Roman civilization. Centered in Constantinople, the Byzantines preserved Roman laws, Greek philosophy, and Christian theology, ensuring that the knowledge of the ancient world wasn't lost. For over 1,000 years, the Byzantines were the bridge between the ancient and modern worlds. But the question remains, how much of our modern world can be traced back to the Romans? From the way we build our cities to the laws we follow, from the languages we speak to the religions we practice, Rome's influence is everywhere. The empire may have fallen, but its legacy continues to shape the way we live, think, and understand the world. Rome wasn't just a place in history, it was the foundation of a civilization that still endures. Which part of this story touched you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're here, don't forget to check out our other videos, like, and subscribe to support our channel.